Have you ever met someone just instantly charmed, right?
Yeah.
But then later, maybe you realize they were mostly just looking out for number one.
Oh, absolutely. It happens all the time.
Yeah, and we've got some really fascinating stuff today, especially from this book, Give and Take. It digs into why our first impressions can be so off sometimes, and how understanding these different ways people interact, being generous or kind of self-focused, or maybe somewhere in the middle, how that can give you a real advantage.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we're often taught, almost implicitly, that success means being, fiercely independent, putting yourself first.
Totally.
But the research we're looking at today, it really throws a spanner in the works.
Yeah.
It suggests there might be a completely different, maybe even better way to succeed.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, that's kind of our mission. Let's try and unpack these dynamics, this giving and taking stuff. Think of it like a shortcut for you, the listener, to get a handle on how these different styles play out in work, in life. Maybe even figure out what clicks for you.
And it's not just theory. We're talking real studies, stories about actual people, CEOs, engineers, you name it.
We'll be looking at things that might, honestly, surprise you. Some findings feel a bit counterintuitive at first.
For sure. Compelling stories, solid research. We'll see how some folks achieve amazing things through generosity, while others, well, they stumble into traps you wouldn't expect.
Okay, so the bedrock here, the foundation, is understanding these three main, what does the research call them? Reciprocity styles.
That's right. Basically how we handle the give and take in our relationships.
So first up, you've got givers. These are the people who, well, they seem to genuinely like helping others out without necessarily keeping score.
Yeah, they contribute without expecting an immediate payback.
Then the opposite end, you've got takers. Pretty self-explanatory, right? Primarily focused on what they can get out of an interaction.
Their own needs come first. What's in it for me? That kind of thing.
And then the third group, matchers. They're kind of in the middle.
Exactly. They aim for fairness, an even exchange. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Quid pro quo.
Right. It's interesting because you could argue that maybe initially that taker mindset seems like the fastest way up the ladder.
Well, that's the conventional wisdom, isn't it? Look out for number one, be tough.
Yeah.
But this book really questions if that's the best approach long term.
And it really drives home how misleading those first impressions can be. That super charismatic person, the one who seems to have it all together.
Yeah.
They might actually be what the book calls a charming narcissist.
Yeah.
Great first impression, super smooth.
But underneath, it's all about them. Purely self-serving.
Which, leads to a pretty important question.
Mm.
If takers are so good at that initial charm offensive, what happens down the line?
And that's where it gets really interesting. The surprising success of givers starts to emerge, although it's not always simple.
No, definitely not straightforward. Because the research actually shows givers often get a lot more respect, more prestige from colleagues.
Yeah, there is that study with engineers. They found a direct link. The more helpful an engineer was seen to be,
the more respect they got from their peers. Which, that makes sense, right? You value people who pitch in.
It does make intuitive sense, but here's the twist, the initial puzzle. That same study, it also suggests that those givers sometimes had lower individual productivity, like the time spent helping others maybe took away from their own task.
Ah, okay. So giving costs you something.
Initially, it looked that way, but, and this is crucial, the engineers who turned out to be the most productive, they were also givers, but strategic ones.
Right, the other-ish givers, as the book calls them.
Exactly. Not just selfless, but other-ish. They give frequently, but they're also smart about it. They protect their own time and energy, too.
It's not about being a doormat. You think about someone like Adam Rifkin. This guy built an incredible network just by doing small 5-minute favors for people consistently.
Yeah, no mental scoreboard, just genuinely trying to help people connect or solve small problems. And that generosity, it paid off big time for him in the end.
And it's not just about networks or productivity. Giving seems to boost creativity, too. And collaboration.
Definitely. Think about George Meyer on The Simpsons. Huge talent, generated amazing ideas.
Right.
But he often focused on the less glamorous work, like rewriting and polishing scripts, because he felt that's where he could add the most value to the whole show.
So he put the show's quality ahead of his own ego, essentially.
Pretty much. And that kind of attitude, prioritizing the collective good, it was vital for the show's incredible success. Research backs this up. Teams with more givers often produce better quality work.
Okay, that's the upside. But we touched on the dark side earlier. Giving without any boundaries. That can backfire, right?
Oh, absolutely. The purely selfless giver, the one who always says yes, never thinks about their own needs, they're really at risk. Burnout is a huge danger.
And getting taken advantage of. The doormat effect.
Exactly. The book mentions Lillian Bauer, this talented consultant. Her career actually stalled because she just couldn't say no. People just kept piling requests on her.
It's a really tough balance to strike, isn't it? Giving is powerful, but if it drains you completely or you feel exploited, well, that's not sustainable.
Not at all. It's a critical distinction.
So, okay, if selfless giving is risky and takers can be charming, how do we get better at spotting those who might, take advantage? How do we identify the takers?
Well, the book points to certain behaviors. One interesting one is called lecking.
Lecking.
Like birds, sort of, yeah. It's about signaling dominance, making yourself look bigger or more important than others. Think about the size of a CEO's photo in the annual report.
Ah, okay, like the Enron example. Ken Lay's picture was apparently huge in their reports.
Exactly. It was like broadcasting, look at me, I'm the important one here.
Almost a subconscious signal of, it's all about me.
Yeah.
And when you look at Lay's actual actions later, well, it kind of fits that taker profile, doesn't it? Using company money, selling stock before the collapse.
Yeah, one former boss even said his ambition was maybe too much. It aligns with that self-first mentality.
And these days, with social media and everything being online, it's maybe harder for takers to keep up the facade. Reputations travel faster.
That's a good point. Online networks like LinkedIn make reputations more visible. If you're thinking of hiring someone, you can often get a sense of how they treat others pretty quickly. It acts as a kind of check.
Okay, so transparency helps. But day to day, how can we get better at telling genuine givers from takers in disguise?
The book suggests something called sincerity screening, basically paying attention over time.
Watching actions, not just words.
Right. Who consistently helps out without expecting something right back. Who seems more focused on what they gain. Jason Geller at Deloitte apparently did this. He'd help new hires, but he'd watch to see who was genuinely trying to learn versus who was just angling for their next step up.
So looking for patterns beyond that initial charm. Okay, makes sense. But what if you do find yourself dealing with someone who clearly leans towards taking? How do you handle that without getting steamrolled?
This is where the distinction between empathy and perspective taking is really key.
Okay, explain that.
Instead of trying to feel what the taker is feeling, getting caught up in their frustration or demands, it's often more useful to try and understand their thoughts. What are their goals? What are their interests?
So understand their angle, but don't necessarily absorb their emotions.
Exactly. Peter Audit's story with that difficult client is a great example. He stopped trying to empathize with the guy's negativity and instead focused on figuring out the client's underlying self-interest. That helped him find a way forward.
Got it. Less feeling, more thinking about their perspective. And the book also talks about escalation of commitment, how we stick with bad decisions.
Yeah, doubling down on failing projects, the research suggests takers are more prone to this.
Why is that?
Ego, mostly. Backing down feels like a personal failure, a threat to their image of being right or successful.
Whereas a giver might find it easier to cut their losses.
Potentially, yeah. If their ego isn't as tied up in being infallible. Think of Stu Inman, the NBA manager. He was apparently good at admitting draft mistakes and moving on, not letting pride dictate future decisions.
Okay, so we've got givers, takers, matchers, how to spot them, how to interact. Now let's shift to something that sounds really backward. The idea that powerless communication can actually be powerful. For givers, anyway.
It really is counterintuitive, isn't it? But the data suggests that givers often naturally use what looks like a less assertive style, asking questions, speaking a bit tentatively, admitting they don't know everything.
And that works.
It can be incredibly effective at building trust and earning respect. Think about Dave Walton, the lawyer you mentioned with the stutter.
Right.
His vulnerability, his perceived lack of slickness, it seemed to make the jury connect with him more, made him seem more human, more trustworthy.
Yeah, relatable. And that Air Force colonel's example, too, when the presenter started by downplaying his expertise.
The feedback was way more positive than when he led with his impressive credentials. It's like showing a bit of humility makes people more receptive, not less.
Huh. So being less overtly powerful can actually increase your influence.
It seems so. And this applies in sales, too. The best salespeople, often givers. They focus on understanding the customer's real needs, on genuinely helping them solve a problem.
Not just pushing the product. Like Kildare Scotto, the optician. His goal was helping people see better. The sales just followed naturally from that.
Exactly. Selling becomes helping. And even when trying to persuade people, like in advertising, the research suggests being tentative works better long term. Don Lane's approach gently suggesting ideas, not hogging credit.
Planting seeds instead of demanding agreement. Builds credibility over time.
And in negotiations, too. Asking for advice instead of making demands. Remember Annie's story about the plant closure?
Yeah, she asked the other side for advice on how to handle it.
And by doing that, she actually uncovered a solution that probably wouldn't have emerged in a typical adversarial negotiation. It leverages collective wisdom.
So this powerless style builds rapport, builds trust, makes people more open. But let's circle back to the doormat problem. How do successful givers use this style without just getting walked all over?
That brings us back to the crucial idea of being an other-ish giver. It's the key difference.
Right. Not selfless, but other-ish.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot, balancing your concern for others with a healthy dose of self-interest. The most effective givers. They're ambitious, too. They have their own goals.
Like the Caring Canadian Award winners. They scored high on both caring for others and having personal ambition.
Precisely. It's not either. You can care about others and pursue your own success.
And what's really wild is that giving, done right, can actually boost your own well-being.
Totally. It's linked to more happiness, more life satisfaction, even better physical health. There are studies on volunteering, stress hormones. Giving can be genuinely energizing.
So it's not just depleting.
Not if it's otherish. And how you give matters, too. The idea of chunking your giving, concentrating your efforts. Instead of spreading yourself thin, maybe focus your giving time or resources on one or two causes or people where you can see a real impact, like Conry Callahan's work with Minds Matter.
Seeing the tangible results makes it feel more rewarding, more motivating.
Exactly. Creates a positive feedback loop. And giving also helps build your support network, that whole tend and befriend stress response. Helping others can actually create reciprocal support systems. When you hit a rough patch, those you've helped are more likely to be there for you.
So it's a sustainable, mutually beneficial way to operate. Okay, that makes sense for individuals.
Yeah.
But how do you scale this up? How do you build a culture of giving in a team or a company or even a community?
There's some really cool examples, things like the Free Cycle Network or those Reciprocity Rings workshops.
Right, where people ask for help and offer help collectively.
Yeah. They create environments where giving is the norm, where generalized reciprocity thrives. Everyone benefits, even people who might normally lean towards taking. The environment encourages giving.
And making giving visible helps too.
Big time. Recognizing and rewarding helpful behavior publicly. That study about bank teller promotions showed that when helping colleagues was factored into promotions.
Even the more self-focused tellers started helping out more. Taps into that desire for recognition.
Exactly. And practically speaking, there's the 5-minute favor idea we mentioned earlier.
Just finding small, quick ways to help someone out. Making an intro, sharing a link.
Yeah, integrating giving into your daily routine. It doesn't have to be huge gestures. And then there are tools like those love machines or smile cards some companies use.
Ways to formally encourage appreciation and recognition of giving.
Right. Building systems that reinforce pro-social behavior.
And one last thing seems important. Emphasizing what people have in common. Shared identity.
Yes. When people feel part of the same group, they're more likely to help each other. That superhero versus Superman study showed that framing things collectively, be a superhero, was more motivating than focusing on an individual icon.
Like the energy conservation experiment, too. People save more energy when they knew their neighbors were doing it. We're social creatures.
Absolutely. We respond to group norms and shared goals.
Okay, so pulling it all together, the big takeaway seems to be that this strategic, other-ish way of giving, it might actually be a more powerful path to success and, well, just a better life than the old dog-eat-dog model.
It really challenges that traditional idea that you have to be purely self-interested to get ahead. The evidence suggests otherwise.
Definitely. So here's something maybe for you, the listener, to chew on. How might shifting your own style, even just a little bit, towards more conscious, other-ish giving, how might that change things for you? Your relationships, your career goals. Think about the examples asking for advice, the 5-minute favor, setting those healthy boundaries so you don't burn out. Maybe just try experimenting. See what happens when you consciously look for small ways to contribute, keeping that balance in mind. Maybe start by just noticing and acknowledging the giving that already happens around you. It's a really powerful area to explore, I think.
Yeah, truly significant potential benefits for you and for everyone around you.